Good afternoon and welcome to IF, Milton Keynes International Festival 2021. And I'm so pleased to be able to welcome you to the very first of our live talks, a digital live talk brought to you directly live from stage 2 in the stables, and the stables being the mothership, the producers of the IF Festival. This is the first of our live talk events which we've developed with the Open University, and we've been so pleased this year to work with the Open University as the knowledge partner for the festival. And without further ado, I'd just like to hand over to Dr. Carla Benzan from the Art History Department. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. So just to say that for the audience, we do have a chat function, and so we invite you to write questions in, and at the end of the event, in the last 15 minutes or so, we may bring them to the artists. But for now, welcome to Marco and Anna. And I'm here with Jessica Hughes from Classical Studies. And so this is really just a chance for us to introduce the work that's on at the festival at IF 21 to the public, and to start raising some of the issues and give you guys a chance to speak about your work. So Jess and I thought that we would start off asking you both just to describe the work that's on show for this 3-week period or so. You know, what will people see? What will they hear? And yeah, just start us off with that. I don't know, Anna, would you be willing to describe Breathing Room?
Sure, yeah. The piece I'm showing is called Breathing Room, as you said. It's a kind of fully immersive sensory experience. So it takes the shape of a sort of tunnel that you walk through. And the tunnel is lined with cones that kind of move around you. And it's in a way that you wouldn't have experienced in the outside world before, so it gives you a different kind of sensory experience.
What kind of sounds are you gonna? Do you think it's more visual or more audio? Is it?
I think it's like completely immersive, really. So it's kind of fully sensory. So yeah, the sound is very much part of it.
Great, Marco.
Yes.
What about the Woodpeckers?
Well, the project aims to create a discussion with the citizens about electrosmog. So I designed robotic birds similar to woodpeckers, inspired by woodpeckers, and able to transform electrosmog into drumming patterns. So what they do, they grab the invisible waves around us, and they create a constant evolving soundscape with the urban metal infrastructure of the city.
So what do they look like?
Well, to me they look like woodpeckers. The first version, they look like rats, but now, step by step, I made it to come closer and closer to a woodpecker. So there is, I think here there is 4 different colors or 5 different colors, and they are color coded. So each one of the color react to the waves in its slightly different ways. So I don't know if you really realize it. To me, they do, but so what I try to recreate somehow, it's a sort of a surround sound. So using the different metallic parts of the urban infrastructure, so you get different pitch and different tones, and it's always a surprise somehow. And with the fact that you can create variation somehow, it makes the project a little bit more spicy, I believe.
Great. So we had a chance to go and look at the works this morning, and they look fabulous. Congratulations to you both. I mean, they both are quite technological and have got engineered aspects to them, and we were really hoping that you could tell us a little bit about the manufacturing process, you know, how long they took to make. Were you on site, were you off site, what materials did you use? Anna, would you like to start?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, the piece had a really long evolution, so it's gone through from prototypes way back in 2014 to the kind of grand scale that you see now. And obviously there's been different levels of makership involved. So the first ones were very much me hacking away welding stuff. And then as we go on, when you get to a piece as big as what we've got, we've had fabricators, which has been a really strange new experience for me.
And how many days have you been on site this week?
We've been here since Tuesday night, so...
Right.
Yeah.
Did the rain get in the way last night?
We hid in the gazebo, so... yeah, it was interesting. We decided to defer till this morning.
Because the cones, they're not made out of paper this time, are they? They're made out of waterproof material, which is handy. Can you tell us about that?
Sure, it's a material called Tyvek, and it's kind of like plastic paper. So it looks like paper and it acts like paper. You retain the character of paper, but it gives you the properties of plastic, like I can wash it, and it's not going to be a problem in the rain and the wind and things. So.
Brilliant, brilliant. And Michael, what are your woodpeckers made out of, and how can you talk a bit about maybe programming them and how you work with computers and tech?
Yeah, sure. It's so they are made out of aluminium. So it's 3 different types of aluminium, 3 different measures. They are totally handmade, and when I say handmade, I mean handmade, meaning that we bend them with our hands, like one piece after the other. So there is 3 pieces, actually 4, but the wings count as 1. So one is the neck, which is the long, tight part where the head is attached. One is the body, and 2 are the wings. So 3 parts. They are different, different sizes and different. How do you say? Sort of different.
Like, is it widths or?
Yeah, exactly. So one is 1 millimeter, 2 millimeters, and they are all numbered to go one piece to another. So even if there is 30 woodpeckers in the swarm, neck number 1 goes with body number 1 and wings number 1. So it's somehow, you know, you could probably make it happen 1 with 13 and 15 with 30, but to be really to stop that moment in which we made them, you know. Yeah. That you bend the body and then you bend the neck for this body and then you bend the wings for this body and this neck. So it's it creates a unique individual bird that, you know, like if you go very close and if you really analyze them, they all look different. Even if they are all the same size in pieces, you know, they all have slightly a different attitude. And some of them, they have a more flexible neck, so I call it the rebounds. As a drummer, I somehow, for this project, let's say that I went inside my skills, so I created somehow necks that they do ghost notes, you know, that since they are flexible, they bounce or rebounds. While the more rigid one, they look much more cool when they hit. So they are not, yeah, the flexible one looks a little bit more funny somehow. But it does, well, it's a different attitude, no? It's a different way of playing somehow. So what I was talking about before with the variations. But enough for the body, so let's get to the electronics. So inside each bird there is an amplifier and an audio receiver. And the head of the woodpecker is the actual loudspeaker. So I don't work with motors or anything like this. I only work with sound. So the base of my work is sound, and everything that moves, there are frequencies between 0 and 20 hertz. So below the audible perception, so you don't hear them, but they are powerful enough to make object move. In this case, the beak of the woodpecker. So what is happening is there is an antenna, which is an Electrosmog meters produced by a company in Germany. So this is an industrial machine that you can buy in the market. And what it does, it translates the electrosmog, so the invisible waves, into audio, into very high frequency audio. And what I do then, I process this high frequency into low frequency, and I send them to the woodpeckers through a Bluetooth system. So when they arrive to the woodpeckers, these frequencies are very low. You don't hear them, but they generate the push and pull movement of the beak. And so it goes from invisible to audible to movement and to audible again through the metal infrastructure.
So where does the electrosmog come from?
The electrosmog is So all the waves that we use for, you know, mobile communication, Wi-Fi, VLAN, radar, GSM, LTE, 5G,
Yeah.
the future. So no, this machine is not programmed to do 5G anyway. It's still an old school one. But so these invisible waves, they are like called also man-made frequencies, and yeah, also electrosmog basically.
It just strikes me, the kind of next thing we wanted to get to is movement. So this is perfect, and I was just struck in how you're talking about technology and what's driving the movement in your work as being quite different than what's happening in the breathing room with Anna, because you can see this, what did you call it, steampunk when we chatted on Zoom.
Yeah.
There's a kind of low techness in a way that you're making something very visible, how movement's happening, but not from the inside, of course. So maybe, would you tell us some more?
Sure. So it's sort of integral to the piece that there's a real contrast between the nature of the outside and of the inside. And of the outside, it's very skeletal, very hard, very mechanistic. And then there's a sort of strange organicness when you get on the inside, and that sense of knowing that this very organic movement is created in such a mechanical way, I hope leaves people with a slight sense of the uncanny. But I'm lucky enough to work with an incredible engineer called Clive Doherty, who's come up with incredible mechanisms to make it exactly as we needed it.
So complicated. You're saying there's still little hiccups and things to iron out, and
Yeah, well, this is our world premiere, so
Yeah.
there is the odd little hiccup still to.
but it's working really well. What about, I mean, so in a sense, with the Woodpeckers, the movement happens, it's completely sort of contingent on who's there with their cell phones, what kind of smog you have. There's no
Yes.
way that you're controlling this in a way, even though it sounds maybe to to people walking by just like these different frequencies of tapping. But have you programmed, Anna, a certain rhythm, a certain...
It's not programmed, but the gears are ratioed, so
Oh, okay.
that's kind of like, I don't know, what kind of programming, if you know what I mean. Yeah, it's got ratioed gears, so it all moves at different speeds. There's no set rhythm. It just feels quite organic and very sort of analog when you're inside it.
I was quite struck. I don't know how you felt, Jess. I mean, I was involved in some of the coning and things, which was really fun. And so I kind of have this experience of seeing it kind of come into the world as a whole. But once it's finished, it's its own entity. And you don't, even though you know what's on the outside, once you're inside, there's that kind of magic, I think, that happens. And that's it just strikes me, this isn't a question, but it just does strike me as something very different than this invisible to audible sort of translation. But it gets at something that I think we'll definitely come back to, which is the way that people are interacting with the work, which seems to be like so critical.
Yeah, you've only had a couple of hours so far to watch people interact, but how's it going? Have there been any reactions that have surprised you or pleased you? You thought, yeah, exactly, that's exactly what I wanted people to feel or think or say?
Yeah, we've had hugely positive reactions already, which has been great. We had people who'd seen a picture on the website and then travelled literally to be there the second it opened to have a look. And we had a kid say that it felt like being inside a whale's belly.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or a flower. It seems like one of those nature documentaries where they speed up, watching a flower open. I felt that. But was there a vision in your head when you made it of the kind of sort of being that you wanted it to be?
I mean, the R&D for the exact manifestation of the movement has been really, really long, because it's a combination of the configuration of the shape of cones going in kind of small and large waves, and even though it's only single plane motion that the levers are moving them, the combination of that motion with the different size of the cones gives a sort of illusion basically of this kind of blooming and opening and organicness.
Yeah.
But it took us a long time to arrive at that configuration of cones. I mean, there's several years of doing it when we didn't have that initially.
Because you did have a previous version of Breathing Room, didn't you? But am I right in thinking that was made out of paper that had stuff written on it?
Yeah, I mean, the original incarnation, we were sort of making a living, breathing colonisation inside the shopping centre. So we had people donating various bits of paper to us, and it was lovely. We had people donating O-level work they'd finished with, and somebody gave me like a copy of their old degree certificate and all sorts of things, and we had people come and help us roll cones, and so it was a bit more community engaged, slightly kind of politically, socially aware sort of project, but it's gone now in development to a very, very different space.
Why did you decide to change that element and not have the kind of found bits of paper? Was it to do with the durability of the material?
Partly, I mean, we could never tour a piece that was made of paper. And partly just the direction that I wanted my outdoor work to take. I wanted it to be much more about sensory experience and about altering people's sense of space than anything quite as cerebral as sort of political ideas.
This, I don't know if it was kind of next in my mental list of what we were going to talk about, but it seems kind of a natural development. You said R&D, is that like research and development? And it struck both of us that there's a kind of scientific, their interest, the physics. I know that you talk about the shape of the cone, and also like the real way that you're engaged, Marco, with looking into technologies and their history and obsolescence. So it's kind of the origin story of the woodpeckers and of the swans seem to be about you noticing the world around you and really understanding something of the technological world that we inhabit. So I wondered if, like, in terms of like research process, like how important is that?
Well, what I always try to find is a connection between starting from the point that I'm inspired by nature and I create, my kinetic sculptures. They are mainly inspired by animals and plants, so I don't do anything else. And so my main inspiration is nature.
And do you want to say more about why that is? Like, is it just fully formed? Is there a sort of story about that?
Well, I try to recreate the biology and functionality of the creature in our ecosystem with a technological entity that metaphorically try to reproduce what nature is doing. So in the case of the woodpeckers, for example, so as we use these waves to communicate with each other, the woodpeckers, they use their drumming partly to communicate with each other, to mark their territory. So I found that this connection was striking, and there was no doubts that the woodpecker was going to be the animal for this artwork, so for this topic. So I'll say that every year I try to tackle a different topic about our environment and the issues that we are causing and that we are living with. And so, for example, after the woodpeckers, I created clams. Clams, which in nature they are detector of pollutants, and they serve as tiny filtration systems within our ecosystem. So I recreated a sort of installation which with animals that look like clams. They are made out of recycled plastic, and they are triggered by water quality data. So there is a sensor in the water that streams real-time data to the artwork, and the artwork, it moves and it generates sound with this data. And the filtering part, in my, of course, imagination, comes out that the speaker, inside each clam there is a speaker installed. And while the sound comes out of these little devices, let's say that the movement is filtering the sound off. So from the data, to sound and movement, to the filtration, to the physicality of the actual sculpture. So this is, I don't know, like it just happened, and it's somehow fascinating more and more what you can find when you design such sculptures. So this year I created moss about air quality, and for the first time I worked with a real creature, so with real moss. So it's, we have it in our ecosystem. It works as a filter for air, and so as a bioindicator of air pollution, and it filters air and water as well. So I created a sculpture which is breathing. Conditioned by the air quality worldwide. So again, I try to recreate the biology and functionality of these creatures, and I'll try my best to respect the actual animal and to bring forward a message of sort of a reciprocity between us, human, and species, between us, human, and the species that inhabit this planet with us. So we shouldn't forget that we are not alone, and we are not the top or anything like this. So
I think it's interesting that it comes out of scientific data, scientific facts, but really it's not about communicating data to people. It's about using that to somehow create new relationships. I think that comes across, with the work.
Somehow it tries to, all the works, they try to speak through data into a different language. It's like a translation of the data, basically, which is, to me, in my imagination, much more, much closer to people. So using also these animals, which are very important within our culture for many different reasons, I believe that the work has the ability to connect with people very quickly, and the audience is not scared away by raw data or numbers or scary messages, but they are more attracted to what the friendly or the noisy or what the friendly part of the work is trying to communicate to them. And then some of them, they have they want to go deeper into the message, so they find out what is behind the artwork, the connection, the topic that I'm tackling, and some of them, they just enjoy the work, and maybe in the back of their mind still it left something. Somehow, to me, it's important to open a door to communication. That's all about the artwork, somehow, to put a hint on the mind of people, and then let them choose if they want to follow in a conversation or not.
That's really interesting that one of your artworks is about breathing. I haven't looked at moss yet, but that's a connection that we hadn't made in advance of this conversation, that you've both got these works that have got breathing at the core. And another unexpected connection this morning was spending time in breathing room and seeing all the birds.
Yeah.
They were loving it.
Yeah.
Did you know that was going to happen?
We had anticipated that there would be a certain amount of guano as an issue, but I didn't realise quite how much they would just like it. I saw one little sparrow perching on one of the rockers, and just like a little fairground ride for a sparrow down. It was really cute.
That was lovely, and that kind of brings us to the site specificity of these works, because obviously they can both be moved around and installed in different places, but today they're in Milton Keynes as part of the festival, and I just wondered if you could both talk a little bit about the special challenges or opportunities that this particular space has offered you. Anna?
So my work is made to be tourable, but again, that's a bit of a departure for me. Most of my site-specific work has been incredibly site-specific, as in the piece grows actually out of the site and the material environment. It's been nice to show Milton Keynes because it's where I live.
Yes.
And I've made a lot of work in my practice about public space in Milton Keynes specifically, so it's nice to show there.
Very nice, yeah.
Did you choose the Queen's Court?
No, I didn't choose it, but I'm glad to be there. Again, the sort of history of my practice is very much having work in public space, and so it doesn't have that kind of slightly sacred, white cubey, we sort of have that kind of stuff about it. It's nice for me to have maybe non-art audiences interacting with it and being drawn in from the public space.
And the AstroTurf is there all the time, is it, in Queen's Court?
Yes, I did not choose the AstroTurf.
But it definitely contributes something to the artwork, doesn't it?
It contributes a lot of static electricity. I'm glad you like it. It's not my taste. But,
it feels a bit like being at a festival or something, and the white and the green I thought were like aesthetically quite good together. But Yeah, I guessed it probably wasn't your choice. They had it installed AstroTurf for today, but yeah. And Marco, you're a visitor to Milton Keynes. So
Yes.
how is this city different from other ones that you've toured your swarm of woodpeckers to?
Well, there is a lot of metal, which
Yeah.
sounds very good, I have to say. And so I was impressed this morning by the reaction of the audience, actually.
Right.
Because I guess what you notice too, and it's probably, I don't know if people is like this in Milton Keynes or they're hungry for things now after the whole pandemic, but the feedback and the loving for the work and the interest and the appreciation, it was great. It was great. Probably, I mean, I don't know if it's like this everywhere in England because I haven't presented work in so many places, but I find it very special and very gratifying to be there, and to be so appreciated. I really felt like a star, I have to say. Yeah.
You are a star.
And the Woodpeckers even more.
Yeah.
So, and the fact that, I don't know what's going on, but usually they are much more noisy, and they seem to be much cooler than in other locations, meaning that there is not this much electrosmog going around, so they're quite quiet, so they respond quite good to the people. So if there is one person approaching with a mobile phone in the pocket, like you feel it immediately, and for me it's very gratifying as the maker of the work, because it's like, yes, it's working. Yes, it's working, because I mean, many times things that don't really go the way that we want. So today was very gratifying. The let's say the love that I got from people, and as well the work and the way that it was responding to the environment and the city.
Oh, that's brilliant. So just to remind people that you can submit questions via Facebook or YouTube if you have things that you'd like to ask the artists that we haven't covered. But just to quickly follow up from that, Marco, have you shown in your home city? You live in Berlin, don't you? Have the Woodpeckers flown to Berlin yet?
Berlin, they had like a premiere in Berlin. One woodpecker only,
Yeah.
so it was at the NGBK, and I didn't like it.
You didn't like it being alone?
No, I didn't like it. I didn't like the exhibition. It was the poor bird alone there in Oranienstraße. It was a nightmare for the bird, really, and also for the librarian that lives next door, I guess. But I don't know. The woodpeckers. No, I didn't really like. I show my work in Berlin. I try to do it like once a year, not too many times, because it's the place where I live, and when it happens, it needs to be special. And somehow in Berlin is never special for one reason or another. It's always very interesting. Let's put it that way. I guess the best show I had, it was at Futurium, where I showed the swans in black and white. So the swans in a black pool, and I mean, it was the pre-opening of the museum, and it's a black room with a black artwork with white swans. So it was very, very beautiful, very, very beautiful. That said, I like to show the work in Berlin, but as I said, it's always a lot of work. It's always a lot of work for one reason or another.
And
So-
they're currently in the UK somewhere else right now?
The Woodpeckers.
Another flock, another group?
Yeah, there is another group at the Wakers, so at the Royal Botanic Garden, Kew, and it's a different version. So it's an individual woodpecker system. So they are attached to xylophone bars. So each woodpecker has a tone. And instead of having one antenna that triggers all of them, so instead of grabbing the data of the environment, they grab the data of the individual visitors. So the visitors can go and point their phone to the tail of the woodpecker, and the woodpecker will start hitting the xylophone, creating an A, B, a C, a D. And so some are there is 2 on the path and then more towards the forest. So 7, 8 people at the same time, they can create this soundscape somehow. They will be there until September.
Okay.
So.
That's going to create a very different sonic effect, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
to the
totally
tapping
different, completely
Noisy
different,
things, yeah.
completely different. Yeah.
And Anna, your work is going to travel as well after this, is that right?
We hope so, yeah. Oh goodness, I think it's going to Wakefield, Crewe, Gloucester, and then to be confirmed.
Will it take a lot of time to disassemble and
Yeah.
reassemble? I knew that was going to be the answer.
It's quite the edifice, so it's pretty intense installation. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk, as you know, Anna, about paper a little bit. And we've already said this isn't actually paper, but it's this Tyvek.
Yeah.
But it just seems like this is a material that you're really kind of committed to, or think through and think with the material. So I just wanted to kind of hear more from you about that, how you, why it is you think you're drawn to the paper, or I have a lot of thoughts about it, but
I think that's quite complex.
yes.
The way that I work, I tend to have a sort of little parallel conveyor belts in my head in terms of concepts, and then in terms of processes and materials. And the concepts is quite kind of intellectual heavy, and the process and materials is very, very gut instinct kind of thing. And so when I make a project, I'm sort of trying to marry the right concept to the right gut sense of aesthetic and form. I think it's quite interesting, having heard other people like curators talk about my work with paper and about how ephemeral it is. Some people relate it to fragility, personal fragility. Some people relate it to ideas of capitalism and ideas of like surplus labour for things that cannot have a material value in the world, because most of what I've done has been very, very ephemeral. So it's been sort of long, repetitive makes with a material that basically is never going to be archival. So there's that kind of aspect of it that's just instinctive. And then there's also, I think, a kind of deeper searching to understand space around us and to understand our human cognitive experience of space. So I get quite absorbed in ideas of dimensionality in physics, and how in our own cognition we're sort of trapped in a cognition that can only experience 3+1 dimensions. And I think in this kind of repetitive praxis of turning a 2-dimensional thing into a 3-dimensional thing, there's a real kind of bullheaded attempt to kind of explore that, and to kind of force us to enable us to kind of experience a different kind of dimension, metaphorically. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, I want to understand the physics, and I don't think I ever will. But it does strike me, because I study early modern scientific imagery to a certain extent, and it just strikes me the importance of paper in that earlier moment, say around 1500, where new printed books were very interactive. So in a sense, the new knowledge about the world, scientific knowledge about the world, you would have flap books, you would have dials. I was working with a great young scholar at the Warburg last year who's interested in astronomy treatises, and makes this whole argument about how you're actually supposed to lift up the book and work with the transparency of the paper to see one image with the other image on the side. So I just, it strikes me about sort of knowledge as well, and I guess that's a kind of part of what I was getting at with the research that both of you do too. So I wish I did understand the physics, but I don't. And having worked with the cones though in the installation process, there is a way that you start to experience the space very, very differently, with all of those shapes that kind of pull you in so collectively sort of encompassing you as well, isn't there?
Yes,
Paper is
absolutely.
definitely having a resurgence in terms of technology. There's people who work with folding and origami who now have a huge interface with the architecture industry and in terms of trying to figure out new ways to make buildings. And it's been a really interesting few years in terms of the technology of paper kind of feeding into that.
It's funny about dimensionality, because that move from 2 to 3 dimensions is something that at least 2 people have talked about this morning, but not in terms of necessarily making cones, but moving from screen to real life interaction, isn't it? So like the last time we met, we were in 2 dimensions, and now we're in 3, and your work is so kind of multi-dimensional actually. Has it been tough, like being an artist during the pandemic? I mean, it's been tough being a person during the pandemic, but from the point of view of your work in practice, has that kind of given extra challenges to preparing these works?
We were quite lucky in that we had a large grant to make the work, and it meant that because we had all sorts of people kind of, I mean, everyone was hand making different elements of the piece, so we had people rolling cones for us doing sort of piecework at home, which meant that during the pandemic we were able to kind of allow people to have mini cottage industries kind of thing. So
and then you all
that
came
was quite
together
nice.
to assemble them. That's lovely.
Yeah.
Marco, how's it impacted on your work in practice?
The pandemic.
Yeah.
Well, it was very heavy on the beginning. I had I was depressed, you know, like everyone else. Start drinking wine at 12.
I'm still doing that.
Yeah, I'm very worried about my family, you know, like about my friends, and being like, scared, like I was never before for such a thing, because I never lived anything like this. But then after a while, I decided to twist this pessimistic approach, and I cut down on phone calls with friends which are even more scared than me. And I started to read the news from another perspective. So, how the pandemic actually was good for the planet and was somehow twisting up our impact. And from then on, somehow I refound my hope, and that's where the idea of moss came along. So, and I started to be concentrated on a new project, since everything else was cancelled or postponed or forget about it. And I started to go out of the house, so getting my bike, go to the studio, not talking to anyone, not inviting friends, like super paranoid. And I started to build prototypes, and somehow, to me, working, creating, generating, it gives me so much energy. I literally don't sleep at night. Many times the ideas, they come together while I'm on my sleep, or I think that I'm sleeping and I'm not. But so it gave me the energy to fight it back. And somehow I believe on this, on your positivity. So as soon as I started to take it from a different point of view, well, things, they start to turn around, and jobs start, like they began again somehow. The exhibitions, at least on my line of work, they started to happen again magically. Some of the people paid the fees. You know, some of the festival paid the fees even if I didn't do anything, and the city of Berlin helped. So yeah, somehow I turned around, and I was able to make a new beautiful piece out of it, which I'm very proud of today, and which I think that it comes out of a moment which is unforgettable, which we all lived, and it will stick into us forever if we want or not. And maybe the actual strike of it still have to come inside ourselves. I mean, you know, like if it's positive or negative, maybe the big thing, the big opening still have to come. I don't know, but at the end I was lucky. And I managed to work make it nice for myself and for the work.
The word that strikes me from what you just said is like a vulnerability. And there's a real shared kind of ethics in each of your works, a kind of, it seems to me, an interest in somehow inhabiting a space between what's non-human but alive and living and human being. And certainly, just to do a kind of shameless plug, I'm going to lead a non-art kind of panel that won't talk about the woodpeckers at the core of it, but was inspired by it, in the sense that my experience in South London during the pandemic was a blissful quiet with actual birds, it was, you know, and this sense of a gift, we can stop and we can think, how do we want to live, you know? And I now, of course, I'm by the A205 and there's just as much traffic as there ever was, but maybe in my own choices and in leading this, you know, panel on the 26th, you know, thinking about your work in new terms because of my experience during the pandemic, realizing our vulnerability as a species as well. The adaptability of woodpeckers who are able to say so much more with metal, you know, and annoy. I guess you were talking about how the woodpeckers, urban woodpeckers actually annoy us, or is that right? I think one question on our little mental list was birds, and so maybe we could turn to birds a little bit more at this point. I don't know if
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, one thing that sticks, so I study ancient history and immediately thought about mechanical birds and the history of mechanical birds when I looked at your work, Marco. I mean, from the 4th century BC, people have been trying to bring birds to life, you know, making wooden doves and trying to make them fly through air and making them sing through water and things. And what is it about birds? Why are we, and birds and mechanics in particular, you know, why do you think there's been this like really long history of engineers working with birds? And people often say birds are good to think with, don't they? That they kind of have, you mentioned like the metaphorical capacity of the woodpecker as well. So could you just maybe talk a little bit about why birds, what drew you? And I know that you have stories about the woodpecker and the swan in particular that drew you to those species, but do you bird watch yourself?
No, actually I don't, but I mean, I grew up in the countryside and there was a lot of birds to watch. I actually had, I wouldn't do it now, but I had like a big, how do you say it? It's called voliera in Italian, so it's a big,
aviary.
It's a bird cage. So my dad built the bird cage when I was a kid, and I had a few species in there. So, and then at one point I couldn't do it anymore. So we opened the doors and we let them go. But for a while I was interested on it somehow. Probably, I don't know where it comes from, I have to say. I mean, it's animals and fishes. My grandpa was a fisherman, so I grew up as well on the boat, you know, like going out and fishing. When I think about it now, I wouldn't do it because there was a lot of dead fish somehow in there. But it was a survival for them. It was a survival. You know, my granddad was fishing and my grandma was selling the fish. So there is a certain connection to animals that comes from the past. And so with this, let's say, I'm still trying to find out myself where this is coming from, because it's also new for me. It's like the swans is the first artwork that I did on this line, and this opened a whole new creative experience for me. So, and then after every year I follow up with a new work, and so it's quite new, and I also sit down and think like, where is this coming from? Why the birds?
So it's not
why
necessarily
the
that you've seen like Leonardo da Vinci or other inventors and people. You're not putting yourself in that trajectory.
No, it's much more. It's much more of a human baby kind of thing, which I can't really reconnect to the source, you know. I probably should ask my family if there is any other point in our family tree where we were much more involved with it. So, but in the case of swans and woodpeckers, swans came out as an accident. So when I was in Russia, in Astrakhan, I just found these satellite dishes, I mean, and hanging out everywhere. And I was going from house to collect audio equipment from a sort of door-to-door eBay Russian thing. And then I found these satellites called Tricolor. And the actual print on the satellite dish is the Russian flag that looks like wings. So I had these speakers and I had these satellites, and somehow I was trying to put things together, as I always do, a little bit of, you know, coming from the jazz academy, I somehow, many times for my work, if it's about hammering or soldering things together, I improvise and then see what comes out of it. And this one came out as a success, which is the Swans today. So I placed the speaker on this satellite dish, and then I put it on the floor. And I might have a picture actually. And this little Russian wings on the satellite, it really looked like a swan that was about to take off. So from there on, you know, the whole artwork took, I think, 2 years to, you know, to come to what is today, or to come to what it was then, you know. And
that's so interesting. So it seems almost like the swan wasn't in your head initially. It was something
no,
that the material itself
came,
generated.
yeah. But I mean, it's a little bit like writing songs, you know, like making music. It's you sit down and you let it come to you. At least this is how I was raised to deal with creativity. My brother is a singer-songwriter. Mama was a singer. Papa was a guitar player. You know, somehow. Yeah, that was the whole thing about let it come. As when I was a kid, my brother always said, like, I open the window and I let the sun come through me, you know, and I don't know who is writing it. That's what he always said. So I probably grew up with this kind of mindset of letting the idea flow through your mind and body, you know, and just shut them out at one point. So, and this is what happened with the Swans. And around it, of course, it was going to be about tech waste, because the place where I picked up these things, it was actually a wetland where this guy had, you know, like anything hanging out there, and there were, like, you know, things coming out of the ground, coming out of the water, plants growing on it. So the artwork was there. I just didn't see it at first. I just saw the satellite dishes, but probably that was the moment where, you know, I was trying to digest. So I created the Swans about tech waste and making this royal and beautiful kind of image with scrap somehow. That was the beginning of my bird experience, which I can't tell where it comes from. But the woodpeckers came, I think, 2 years later. And yeah, as I said, I was trying to make an artwork about Electrosmog. And the connection with the woodpeckers came about the communication. And there is always incident that they happen during the creative process that let me choose what's gonna be the creature representing the topic and being the subject of the work. So, and in the woodpeckers there were many different incidents. One was the woodpecker in my garden that I never seen again. Never seen again in the garden of my studio. This little thing was there, like, while I was, is it really a woodpecker I want to do? This thing comes out of the blue in a tree. Never seen the thing again. And the more techie part comes from from Russia again. So the connection to Russia, also on the second work. During the Cold War, there was this Russian antenna that was called the Russian woodpecker. That was somehow sending a signal, an intermittent signal to, you know, radio communications, TV, airplane, aviations. So nobody knew what it was, but there was this pecking noise for years, interrupting everything and everyone. And only after the Cold War, so the Russians decided to say it was us. The antenna is called Duga 3. It's not in use anymore, but you can see it's the size of a building. And yeah, so finding out about the Russian woodpecker and this pecking noise, there is some recordings online of it. And it sounds like, it sounds exactly what it sounds when you point the phone to my artwork right now. So when you point the phone to the antenna, this ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, which is then translated into woodpecker sound, is exactly that noise. So anyway, coincidence that brought me back to my childhood, to who I am, or the way I was raised, brought me to create these artworks that are somehow related to animals, and probably they will be. I don't know. I have the feeling that now, what was in the past, it's done, and now there will be, you know, like the first part of your life. Now it's already artwork number 4 or 5 in this line. I think that I played all my cards for the first part of my life. At least now the next artworks, I don't know what they're gonna be, if they're gonna be animals, but for sure they are slightly gonna change into the second part. Probably when I left home and everything, you know, I left the countryside, so I went into the city. So I don't know, I'm very curious to see what's the next one are gonna be. We'll see.
I was wondering if maybe Anna just could say something about a conversation I had inside while we were doing installation, where it's about, just we're talking so much about human-animal relations, and the breathing room, it's organic. Is it, I mean, I know you're going to say it's not one thing, but there is something plant-like or almost, you know, microscopic. Is it meant to evoke something of the organic? Because it does also seem other. You know, you spoke about uncanniness, so there was kind of, when I was watching video of it, it was like as though I was watching almost like a horror film, you know, this kind of organic, like an alien is going to come springing out, or, you know, you don't quite know.
I hope it's not too scary.
No,
Scary
really.
is not what I'm going for.
But yeah, it'd be
Yeah, I'm trying to plumb something quite subtle. I'm trying to get a sense of organic, while at the same time it being apparent that it's very much not organic, as you say. Yeah.
Was there any, and there's no kind of identifiable thing, is it maybe coming out of working with paper then, and that kind of interest in dimensions maybe more than anything that you can locate? You know, it's so easy for us to speak about woodpeckers, but it seems like, yeah, it's not something in your work that we can identify, and that's part of the way
it's quite difficult to
means.
discuss this kind of work because it's inherently quite ineffable. I mean, it's almost, yeah, it's inherently ineffable because it's about experience, and it's about that sensory experience within yourself, and so there is something hermetically sealed about that you can't put words to. So there is a kind of slightly frustrating inherent futility in trying to kind of have that discussion about what I'm going for, because it's quite, yeah, difficult. I was kind of interested in what Marco was saying about his attitude towards creativity, and I think mine is really contrasting to that. I feel like I will have a idea of something in my head, and it is this enormous bloody battle to try to almost force it into existence and to render it and to make a material do something it doesn't want to do, or, you know, whatever. It's really stressful. It's not like floating away in a corner painting going la la la. It's like it's this kind of enormous cognitive strain in trying to birth this thing, and I feel like material reality becomes a sort of unwitting collaborator, essentially, something that doesn't want to collaborate with me and something with which I don't actually really want to collaborate. And then at the end I'm really dissatisfied because that collaboration has meant that this utopian idea of whatever I had in my head is never rendered like that in reality, and so it always feels that I've fallen short in some way, and it takes a good 6 months to a year to look back at something and say, well, actually what the physicality of the material added to it and created something that was better for us both working together than just that very purist idea in my head. But I was thinking, that kind of struck me because you were saying, oh, you know, I'm like a body that it all just comes through, and I'm thinking, bloody hell, it's a lot more effort than that for me.
Wait a second. No, I didn't say that. Maybe I was like, this is the idea that comes through. And like I struggle a lot with the material. I mean, as much as you do, as much as we all do. No, it's first of all, you need to decide which one you're gonna use, and when you decide which one you're gonna use, you need to work with it. And I learn how to accept and forget the material and the artwork, because at the end of his journey, it always pissed me off. It always made me so angry because I worked for a year on it, and the first thing that I did, it was working exactly as I wanted. Why are you not doing it now after 1 year that I'm working for you and with you? You know, it's a relationship that you do with the material. I guess now you feel me, right?
Yeah.
So the relationship that you build with the material and with the artwork. But then again, Anna, at the end, I realized, as for the woodpeckers, as for the moss, as for the clams, that they get to the end, and you gave birth to an artwork. You gave life to something which is going on its own. Like at one point, you were the transmitter. Yes.
It's out in the world, you let it go.
Yeah, I mean, it's you were the one that brought it to life, but then it's about the artwork now. You're not standing there performing 10 hours a day. You're not the breathing room anymore. You were a part of it. It took away all your power, energy, vital resources, money, hours of sleep, everything it took away from you, but now it's not you anymore. So it's
I'm still at that process of cutting
the
cord. I've only just birthed the thing.
It's new, I know, but
I think you're right though, it belongs to everyone. By the time you've put the artwork into the world, it doesn't belong to you anymore.
It's not yours.
You can't control how other people respond to it. You can't be cross with them for not responding to it the way you want them to respond to it. It becomes the ownership of everyone who experiences it, I think.
And mainly it's like, you know, why I do this, or the way I do it, you know, the mechanical part, it gets used. It's like us. It's getting old. It's growing it into itself. So why is not doing that movement anymore? Because it has its own thing now running. And why it's not working during sunshine? You know, I don't know what happens. It happens. Many things happen that we probably think that they go wrong, and maybe they are not even going wrong. You know, maybe it's a natural process that the artwork at one point just crashed, and it says to you, "I'm fed up as well. I'm also here since 1 year, and you are not leaving me alone for a second. Just give me a break." You know, like you never know. And I'm always like, and I really have crisis, like. I really have crisis where I, you know, do not respond to my, I can't control myself. I scream at the artwork. Like in the case of Moss, it drove me crazy. Don't get me started on this because it drove me crazy. And at the end, it was like, it's not moving the way I want it. It's not moving the way I want it. And then, you know, the day after I go there and there is like a family of frogs which are living now in the artwork, and there's a cricket, and there's a thing, and the software does weird stuff, but still, like, you think like, why is it doing this? And the audience is like, wow, fantastic. You know, the glitches that they happen, it's the process. It's growing, and it has its own life. It's beautiful. And next time when you're gonna set this down and you bring it somewhere else, it will be totally different, and you know it.
I mean, it will be, because in every site, the site will bring its own thing to the work anyway. So yeah, it will always be different.
We've had some questions come in from viewers at home. Anna, a question for you. You mentioned working with an engineer on this piece.
Yes.
So how has collaborating with others impacted your work?
I find it tremendously empowering, really, because if you have big ideas and you're going to need 25 different skill sets to realise them, it's very unlikely you're going to be able to do that on your own. So if you want to work at a certain scale and I don't just mean physically big, but in terms of the scale of your ideas, then it's going to be about gathering together a really great team of people who can each bring their skill and enthusiasm to bear so that you can all make this thing happen.
Yeah, yeah, great. And Marco, you work with others as well, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
What would you say in response to the question about how collaboration has impacted your work, and are there particular collaborations that have, maybe we shouldn't say that have worked better than others?
I think I never really understood the definition of collaboration, actually. And what is collaboration? What is people working for you? Would you describe your experience with this engineer as a collaboration, or somebody that brings your idea to life? And is this a collaboration, actually?
That's a really fuzzy line, actually, and it depends on the project. I think in this case, I would say it's definitely a collaboration, because I think the nature of that movement and working through that movement and having done it for so many years together, and just working with that one goal in sight, for me, makes it a collaboration.
Yeah.
But there are definitely other times where you really are more sort of saying to someone, this is the effect I want, please design me something that does it, and it's more of a fabrication.
Yeah.
But you're right, it's a fuzzy line, and it's really hard to sort of say this is one and this is the other.
Yeah. So for me, I work with different people depending on the project. I always had the idea of I need to do everything by myself, you know, like, I don't know, maybe to prove myself or my ego, I don't know. But then at one point, you just cannot do it. You just cannot do it. Even if I do only one project a year and nothing else. So I just, you know, bring around the works that are already existing, maybe do one extra version of a work which is already there, but I mainly do only one work. And this takes all my energy also for the fact of working with people, because sometimes it's just, for me, it's much easier to close the door, you know, and be by myself. That you don't need to deal with the emotion of anyone, you know, and you don't need to deal with the crowd of people. You don't need to deal with the frustration. And I think that right now I have people around me, colleagues, which I believe I believe in their opinion. So some people just pop in, you know, they're architects, they're set designers, they're musicians. This is the beauty about Berlin, no? You have very, very, very good artists which can just pop into your studio while you are there crying, crying like, okay, this will never work, you know? And they go and they come and they give you an idea and they show you a piece. Why don't you use this? Or why don't you, from the mechanical point of view, from the design point of view, from the aesthetic, you know, from the software engineering. So I have a circle of people that I call crying, which I go like, you need to come because I'm really getting crazy. And they go from give me an advice to stay there with me struggling at night, you know, like, and bring one thing to the end, to people that I pay, you know, and I have an idea for the software, for example, or for the design of a certain things, and they bring the goal to an accomplishment. So skills that I don't even want to have, actually, but that I don't know anything about, that I just know that the work needs to go in this direction, and I wouldn't know how to bring it myself from one side to the other. So slowly I'm changing the idea of doing everything by myself, and I'm starting to understand that I need to accept help, and I need to accept that I'm not able to do everything that I want to do. The works are becoming more and more complicated, more and more sophisticated, more and more high-end, more and more durable, you know, like, you don't achieve this without the help of real professionals, that they know exactly how to do it. It's impossible.
Yes. Another question about the festival, and actually whether you both like your work being presented in a festival context with so many other works and music and dance and, again, people. Is this something that you enjoy doing? Anna?
Yeah, I really like it as a context. Yeah, I like it. It's in keeping with the way the rest of my practice is manifested, really being about work in public space. So,
Yes.
yeah.
That's great. Marco?
Yeah, so I mean, it's work in public spaces. When you decide to do it, you know, you do it because you want to give this to an audience, which is, yes, coming for you, but maybe just passing by. It's going to see the dance and they say, oh, there is the other artwork there, go. And it's beautiful to bring art to people and not let them people come and see your art, which is the example in the White Cube, no? That only selected, you know, people, certain people go and see your artwork. Here you bump into anything or anyone, and it's beautiful to see actually how the different people approaches the artwork, interact with it, and what's the message of the artwork given to the different type of audience.
Something sort of come into my mind just listening to that question and other answers, things you guys have said. Did either of you go to art school, the capital A art school? Because both of you are musicians, aren't you? And so one of our questions was about like sound and rhythm, which is obviously a part of these works, but maybe it would be interesting to just hear a bit about your journey to becoming kind of visual artists, as well as that, you know, this is a festival with performance work, with sound, and a kind of celebration. So that's not, I don't know what I'm asking, but you could either take the biographical or you could talk about the work and how important sound is to it. Because I think when we were speaking at an earlier date, Marco said something about, you know, my work is, the material of my work is sound, and it's and your response today to seeing Anna's piece finally after hearing about it and having it in your mind's eye, I presume, was the rustling, crinkling, there's creaking. So maybe just especially because a lot of the people won't have had a chance to visit the work yet, you can say something about any of those things. Marco, and then Anna.
Are you asking about my path, how I got here, right?
I think it would be great to hear about, you know, because you were trained in percussion, and it's so relevant to your tapping Woodpeckers. Yeah.
So I studied drums at the Siena Jazz Academy. Very wonderful experience. And after I think 2 years after I finished the study, I moved to Berlin because I felt that there was nothing in the country and nothing from the actual scene that could help me develop God knows what I was following. I had no idea. So, and when I moved to Berlin, it was like, you know, opening doors after doors, going to noise concert, playing with rock bands, you know, like going and experience anything and try out everything. And step by step, you know, again, I met architects, choreographers, you know, set designers, musicians, composers, whatever, fashion designers, and all these people and all these collaborations and all these inputs, somehow they challenged me to look at my creativity from a different perspective, a different point of view. So, and I slowly shift from sound in the mean of making music into sound art and visual art. But it was a long process. So I think the first artwork I made, it was in 2008, I think. Maybe it's not a long process for a lot of people. For me, it was. But so 2008, I started to collaborate with Plastic Fantastic. So working, you know, with the giant inflatables, that we would turn these architectural pneumatic structures into sound forms somehow, and then it became somehow having the trigger from the sunlight or from the heartbeat of people. So from the actual room, sounding room, it became more organic and data driven, you know. And then at one point, I think it was the sound of light, where I started to see how the whole thing was moving with bass frequencies, and I started to visualize actually sound in my head. And there I moved to New York for 6 months, And there I did the New York series, which was simply, you know, going to the $1 shop and get anything there and just attach all this material to the membrane of the loudspeaker and just shooting in bass frequencies and see what this material would do. If you look in my website, there is videos of these prototypes. There is, you know, from the American flag floating with bass frequencies to a sushi mat to much more complicated things made with rubber bands, which is sort of a waterfall, but everything that moved with vibration. So, you know, just trying to test. So, and 1 + 1. So the experience that I got from the collaborations with the architects, you know, and the fact that I could make actually living sculptures, and the experience that I got in New York. So how sound can actually create life and give life to a sculpture. Then it came together with the swans in Russia, and this was somehow the explosion that drove me into what I do today. So step by step, I left music for the meaning of making music in the way that I was doing it, to become more a sound artist and a visual artist.
And what about you? Are you still singing? Do you still perform? And how does that sit with your art practice?
I do still sing, I do still perform. I'm not sure that it has any relation to my art practice at all. It's just something I do. I've always done it.
Is it classical music that you sing?
All sorts,
All
actually.
sorts,
Yeah, because I have lots of different voices. So if you heard me sing classically, you would not recognise me singing jazz, for example. You would think it was two different people, because I sing in sort of different registers and different voices. Yeah. Sorry, what was the question?
No, it was just I was just curious if you're aware of a real relationship between those two sort of those two practices in a way, because sound, or if it's just, sound is, where does it sit when you're making a work? Is it like at the forefront of, let's say, when you were sort of wrestling with the materials of the breathing room, was a part of what you're wrestling with to get it to look like it was moving the right way, the way you imagine, or to make the right sounds, or sort of everything?
The sounds were pretty incidental, but a little bit like that kind of happy accident thing. They become very integral, but I didn't at all set out to have it sound a particular way. And this version sounds very, very different from the original version. And both times it's almost been a surprise to me to realise how integral the sound actually is. But it was not, I can't claim to have masterminded that. It just was.
It's more the way that it feels to kind of be in that space, essentially, as what you were wrestling with.
Yeah.
I don't have any idea what time it is.
It looks like we've run out of time.
Okay.
We've been so absorbed in the chats that we, didn't think to look at the watch, but it's been amazing talking to you and getting that context for the works that we saw this morning.
I've got my message on paper from Bill. Just to let everybody know that not only is this recorded and available online, but Breathing Room and the Woodpeckers on every day of the festival. So I think some of the artworks aren't, but the Woodpeckers are kind of migrating and flocking and moving, and that Breathing Room is, of course, in Queen's Court. They're on view until the 30th of July. I'd like to personally thank Bill for inviting me into this work, for both of you, for really opening my eyes and sparking some really interesting reflection on what I do as an art historian. So thank you both, and thanks to everybody that listened today as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you, Carla. Thank you very
Thanks.
much.